Welcome back to Dr. Read the Puddle. For those of you that hit my subscribe button, thank you. I sincerely appreciate it. About a month ago, we opened up the box on the new Fronius Transsteel 2200. Showed you the new torches and all the different assortment of parts that came along with this machine. I've had a chance now to weld with it a little bit, and I want to review this machine and tell you some of my pros and cons of the new Transsteel 2200. But before I do that, I want to give a little shout out to Mr. Brian DePaul. Brian DePaul is the owner and president of Welding Material Sales in Geneva, Illinois, and you know him as the Blue Demon guy, and he has been a huge supporter of our program here at Elgin Community College and supports our welding competition for high schools, and he's a big supporter of schools around the country. So Brian, thank you for all you do for the program and for the welding industry. So many of you know that Fronius is getting traction out in the industry. Are they ever going to be as big as Lincoln or Miller? I'm not sure. For a long time, I've had my issues with the European machines like ESAB because of the difficulty working the interface and some of their terminology they use to set the equipment. So far, I've had a pretty good experience with the Fronius Transsteel 2200. I feel the interface is a little easier to operate, and I think it's a pretty decent machine all around. And I want to go into more of the pros and cons with you next, and I will start by opening up the wire feeder here and kind of giving you a little rundown of what's inside the machine. Then we'll move across to the front of the machine and go from there. So stay tuned. Okay, as you can see here, I'm to the side of the machine where the wire would go into the piece of equipment. So right off the bat, I have to say that when I open this panel, you can see it's a little chintzy. It is plastic. It's got little plastic clips here, which I can tell you over time, these are probably going to break off. I'm not sure. Again, this I would definitely say is more towards a garage welder, a hobbyist welder. It's by no means a commercial quality welder. While it may last a long time, it's just certain things on this wire feeder I will tell you I don't like. So for starters, our wire feeder parts are all plastic. They look like to be a molded plastic, and I can tell you over time, I would guess enough tension pulled on this spot here is probably a weak spot, and I could see that casting, that plastic casting breaking off. And even the wire feeder, or the drive roller, actually the idle roller here is just a bearing, that's all plastic too. So I can't say I'm real keen on that. The parts here as well, you can see are plastic, and this isn't that big a deal. There's not a lot of wear on this spool nut for the 10-pound spool, and this will only hold 10 pounds. And you can see, all of this stuff will probably hold up okay. But my main concern would definitely be the parts on the actual drive roll system. They're just made kind of chintzy. Now, I do like up here. This is an extra attachment for a 1-pound spool. That's kind of a neat option, so you don't have to change this around every time for a 1-pound spool. It does give you can see if you look down inside there, these are part numbers for your equipment, for your MIG tips and your nozzles and drive rollers, and those are all Fronius part numbers. I do know Fronius tends to be a little pricey on the consumables, and we will find that out soon. And it does have a nice little spot here you can put your extra MIG tips and drive rollers. And it gives you some basic setups for the drive roll tension and different drive rollers for wire diameter. So again, this is more of a hobbyist garage welder, not a commercial welder, but all in all, I think it will do just fine. So let's move forward to the front of the machine where all the action happens. Okay, back to the front of the machine, the business end. So, as everyone knows, when you buy a new power source, you usually end up with a stack of manuals that's almost as thick as War and Peace and written in just about every language under the sun. So, and this one's a good example of that. So with that being said, it's super important to follow your manufacturer's guidelines on your machine, and I get that and I respect that. But any welder that you buy, you should be able to go up to the front of that machine with it turned on and operate that machine with relative ease. In the past, like I said, some of the ESAB machines we have in the shop are just very, very complicated and complex to set up, and most of my students do not grasp some of the terminology on that machine. So I do have to say Fronius has kind of done away with some of those weird buttons on the machine and some of those weird settings that I just, like I said, I don't really care for. So right off the bat, we can look at the front of this machine and see it's laid out pretty good. So let's just start with the lower right corner here. You can see we have our TIG setting, our stick setting, our TIG setting, our manual MIG, and our synergic MIG. And synergic MIG is basically parameters that are built into the machine. You set your wire, whatever wire you're using, your wire diameter. You set your gas you'll be using, and then it allows you to kind of select your thickness. And the machine's got parameters built in that allows you to basically hit all those buttons, and it's kind of plug and play, squeeze a trigger and go, and then you can make minor adjustments on your arc length to get that weld dialed in. So all in all, pretty simple. So we can see if we toggle through there, it goes in the TIG, simple amperage settings there, or our voltage. We haven't struck an arc yet, so it's showing 0. Manual MIG, pretty simple. You have your voltage here, and we can toggle over to wire speed. That's actually the amperage setting, and you can see there's your wire speed settings, pretty straightforward. And again, synergic MIG opens up a whole nother can of worms here. So we got our basic steel wire, which is ER70X-S6, pretty common wire, and then we can go to stainless, we can go to silicon bronze, metal cord, self-shielded, basically, any wire you would be using, you can toggle through there and get that set up. And then our wire diameter, pretty simple, 0.23 up to 0.45, and 0.45 would kind of be pushing it. On this machine, again, it's a smaller machine, a little less amperage output, but pretty capable of running 0.45. I just don't think you'd be able to burn it for 2 hours straight without the machine shutting down. And then you come over here, it allows you to select your different gases for the synergic process, and then you can adjust your thickness here and basically get her dialed in to where you're comfortable, and you can adjust your arc length. You run a little longer arc length, a little shorter arc length to get that machine sounding good. So kind of a pretty straightforward setup on the machine. So then we have some settings for your trigger. So 2T is a basic on-off switch like a trigger. Just like your MIG trigger, you squeeze the button, and when you let off, the wire stops. If you're running like a 6-foot weld and your thumb's cramping up, you could set the 4T mode where you hit that trigger once, it starts the process, you run it. As long as you need to run it, you hit it again and it shuts it off. That way you can rest your hand a little bit and it's going to stay welding. And then there's some other built-in settings here, the S4T, which is a little more complex setting for that trigger control, and it's probably not going to be used much for the basic welder that's working out in his garage. So, and then we can kind of come over and see there's memory presets here. So if you got 2 processes you're using a lot and you want built-in settings, you don't have to constantly change them over every time. You hit your memory setting, it's all programmed in there, and that's kind of a neat thing if you're doing a lot of the same stuff. This machine also offers us to, a gas purge if we want to get that gas out through the torch. Allows us to purge our gas, and it also gives us in the MIG mode, it also allows us to spool that wire through without closing the contactor in the machine when you change your spool. So, pretty nice stuff if you're switching out spools a lot. So, all in all, I have to say it's a pretty decent machine as far as the interface goes. Pretty simple. There are a lot of other programs in this machine. There's a whole page of it that we can go through. I just don't want to get in that depth of this machine just because most people will be using it for the basic stick, basic TIG, and basic MIG, and maybe synergic. So, but there are a lot of other settings that we can get into in this thick book here, that this machine has built in it. So, like I said, pretty easy setup. You can see now if we go down to the bottom, pretty simple for changing your polarity. You got your positive here, and you got your negative. So if we're doing flux cord and we have to switch our polarities, or solid wire or stick or TIG, we can switch it around, and then pretty simple release on the TIG torch, MIG torch. So pretty solid, pretty decent, pretty easy to work with. So far so good. So the next thing I want to do, I have some 030 wire in here. I just want to turn it on, run a couple beads, see how it feels, show you what it looks like and sounds like, and I'll do my best to get a good clear picture of the arc. It's always Always hard to get a good picture of the arc, but we'll do our best, so hang tight. Okay, I know it's hard to see here, but we're going to do a lap weld in the horizontal position. 20.4 volts, about 235 inches per minute, and this is 030 wire on 3/16 plate, and we'll just do a backhand technique with a little bit of a weave in there, and then we'll move on to synergic next. So here we go. So you can see a good start on the arc, nice and smooth. I like how it wets out in the plate for the smaller wire. Seems to be doing a pretty nice job here. All in all, pretty smooth arc. Okay, so as you can see, not too shabby. Pretty decent weld, pretty decent puddle. So I will move on to the synergic mode next, where we will enter the plate thickness and some parameters into the machine and see how she does. Now we're moving into a synergic process where I entered 3/16 plate into the machine, ran it for a little longer arc length so you guys can see a little better, and let's see how she runs in synergic mode. I'll run a push on this with a stringer and see how well that 030 wire burns off that top edge of this plate here. Watch your eyes. As you can see, definitely a little bit hotter in that setting there, and that was set for 3/16 plate on the machine. So I'll run another one and actually drop the plate thickness a little bit and see if we can cool that puddle down. Definitely seemed a little hot, so I will turn the machine down and we'll try another one. So I backed some of the parameters down on the machine, and let's see how she welds again. And again, I put a little less plate thickness on the machine. I did quench the plate too, so let's see how it looks. As you can see, that sounded a lot better, and that plate just wasn't as wetted out. So you can see that was the higher setting and that was the lower setting. So I think somewhere in between there would probably be perfect. So pretty neat setting. Is it necessary to run a good bead? Probably not, but a neat option for the machine. Okay, time to do some stick welding here. I'm running a 1/8 inch Excalibur, Lincoln Excalibur electrode. We're DC positive, 123 amps, about 51 on the arc force dynamic. So let's see how it fires. So far so good, nice smooth start. I do notice that running a scratch start when running stick on inverters seems to work better. If you kind of just stab that rod, they don't tend to fire as nice. They tend to stick or not fire at all, but that was a pretty smooth start for an inverter. You can see a nice smooth arc. Sounds good. Puddle staying roughly 1/4 inch behind me. Looks good at 123 amps. I could probably go down a little bit here. But all in all, feels great. As you can see, not too shabby. Welded nice. I have, little complaint about that. It looks nice. Welded very good. So the stick setting looks very nice, and welds real nice as well too. Now the part I'm really excited about. So the Fronius Transsteel 2200 does have a TIG option on it. So it does come with a torch with a thumb control and allows you to start the arc. It gives you a scratch start option, no high freak, and it also allows you to adjust your amperage from the torch. Now that's kind of cool if you can get used to that thumb control. I'm used to a foot pedal, But all in all, it doesn't take too much time to get used to. I've only spent a few minutes with this TIG torch, and I'm, for the most part, pretty comfortable with it. It does weld very nice. It doesn't deteriorate your tungsten on the scratch start. Gives you a nice low, low output at the beginning, and it just does a fantastic job. When you get to the end of your weld, you let off, and it does crater fill automatically and leaves your shielding gas on, so you get some post-flow timing. And all in all, very nice, smooth arc, and I'm very impressed with it altogether. And you can see, it does a really nice job. All in all, nice clean weld. Again, good crater fill at the end, and just a fantastic little machine for the money. I'm very impressed with the TIG option on this Fronius. So that's the Fronius Transsteel 2200. You've seen it in action. You've seen some of its bells and whistles, some of the pros and cons of this machine. As I tell everybody and my students, if you're looking to buy a welder, number one, look at your pocketbook. What can you afford? What is the material you're going to be welding with? Are you going to be strictly welding aluminum, steel, thick, thin, stainless? Will you be welding indoors or outdoors? What amperage do you have in your house? Do you only have 110 volts or do you have 240 volts? But definitely keep all of these things in mind. But if you're considering a machine for your house, for your garage, for your shop, the Transsteel 2200 is definitely a solid option. I will say that I'm more looking at some more Fronius in the future, and I may even look at some more ESAB down the road, because I feel that they're making some traction in the industry, and everything that I ran today I was very impressed with. So some of the downsides, maybe the wire feeder, a little too much plastic in there, that can be overlooked for a machine that welds great. So if you like what you saw, please hit the subscribe button. I plan on making more videos on different power sources and different pieces of equipment. And feel free to chime in if you have any comments on my videos. I'd love to hear from you. And thanks again for watching.